Okay, so I want to talk about right now one of the latest innovations in the anti-spam technology world, um, and what it's called is email reputation. Um, Essentially, what this is they're looking at not just an email that you've sent and judging your email on that alone as to whether to filter it or to block it. They're also looking at your reputation over time, and the way this works is they look at they compare practice. They look at what practices are of and what typically is done by people that have opt-in lists, and then they also look at what spammers are typically doing, and then they try to see where you fit in that continuum. So if you think of at one end of the scale, you have opt-in people. The other end of the scale, you have spammers. They want to see where you fit in between there. And the closer you are to in the scale towards opt-in, even if you don't have an opt-in list, if you just simply have a targeted list that you've acquired through other means than opt-in, then your emails will get rated and treated as if they were opt-in and get put into the inbox. So, for instance, there's a service that I use that's called SenderScore. That's the most popular one out there. It's by a company called ReturnPath. And what SenderScore will do is when you enter your mail server's IP address, it'll give you a numeric ranking for your server, and it will be anywhere from between 0 worst and 100 for best. And you can anytime you can look up your IP's current rating for free at senderscore.org, I believe it is, or senderscore.com. I'm not sure if you can Google it. And this actually is changing this number is changing almost on a daily basis. What they're really looking at is several metrics. The volume. They're also looking at how regular you are with your campaign. So if you're sending out a campaign once every week consistently, on say Monday, then over time they'll see, well, that's behavior that's typical of someone that has an opt-in list. If your volume is huge and irregular, then that's a sign of a spammer. They're also looking at the number of bounces that you get, the hard bounces that you have in your list, the number of spam complaints, and also the open rate and the click-through rate. They want to see that as well. Typically a spammer is getting a very low click rate, anywhere from below 1% in most cases, whereas an opt-in list, they're typically getting anywhere from say 5% up to maybe about 25%, depending on the content and so forth. So big difference there between the opt-in list and a spammer list. So the way this works is that they have relationships, like SenderScore has relationships with Hotmail and Yahoo and all these major broadband providers, not all of them, but a lot of them, where they get this data from them on different IPs. So Hotmail will say, okay, this IP has sent, this week has sent, X number of emails to our accounts, and this is how many people opened them, this is how many people clicked them, the email, this is how many people, deleted it without, looking at it, this is how many people made a spam complaint, etc. And so what they do is they take all this data from each of these major providers, aggregate it all, and then that's how they come up with this SenderScore rating. And it can fluctuate a lot. Now, one of the biggest ways that you can lower, that causes your SenderScore to get lower, is if you have dead addresses in your list. This is the biggest telltale sign of a spammer, is a poorly maintained list in terms of hard bounces. hard bounces being emails that are permanently non-existing, and soft bounces are emails where you've tried to deliver an email to a given account, and there is a temporary reason why the email is not being delivered. But if you try again later, that the email may be delivered. So hard bounce, permanently dead address. Soft bounce is a temporarily dead address. One thing to note here is that companies like this, Return Path, and CloudMark and CenterSpace are other ones. They're mostly used with the free, the consumer email accounts. So we're talking about the free email accounts like Hotmail, Yahoo, Gmail, and also people that are using broadband accounts. Accounts that come with their broadband internet provider or dial-up. They're not really used nearly as much with business email accounts at the corporate level. Another one here that's worth talking about is, so I'll just finish up with SenderScore. So some of these, it's very black and white. Some of these providers are looking at, like for instance, Hotmail will say, okay, we will only look at emails. We will only put in emails that have an X score or greater. So, for instance, they might say, we will only put emails into the inbox that have a score of 80 or better, according to SenderScore. And that's their primary influencer on what to do with the email. And some of them have a rating system where they'll say, okay, I can't think of any ones off the top of my head, but they'll have a thing where it'll be rated. So 90 or above for sure gets into the inbox. 80 to 89, maybe very likely to get an inbox if there's no other major issues and so forth. It's sort of a graded system, and that is when they're often using other factors, taking into account other factors other than the SenderScore rating to do it, where it's not so black and white. Although this is very influential in any case. With CloudMark, the way they do it is they have a proprietary system of looking at email, and what they do is that they rely on user feedback to some extent, where they're getting this same sort of aggregated data from the email providers about what has been identified as spam by users. But they use a system that tries to sort of, you might think of like a profile. They try to make a profile of what a typical what spam is currently happening out there right now. So think of like a sketch artist working for a police department that is sketching out a picture of someone that's wanted for some sort of crime, and if your picture, if your face looks someone like that picture, you may be arrested and charged with whatever crime. Same idea with CloudMark, that if your email fits the profile of what they view as the current spam emails that are going around right now, various elements, then they will label you as a, at least initially, as a spam email. But, however, if people are going into their spam folders and consistently marking this email as not as spam, over time, CloudMark can, reverse that decision and say, okay, well, we're going to rate your emails now as not spam because the people have spoken and more people are rating your email as not as spam. They're opening it, they're clicking it, they're forwarding it to other people, etc., versus the number of people is relatively small that are either deleting it on site or without opening it or marketing it as spam. So, in general, the email industry is, especially with the consumer accounts, they're leaning more towards using this reputation service, the email reputation, because they're seeing that, the problem is that the traditional ways of judging spam, where they're using things like keywords, judging an email by the keywords that are used in it and so forth, and we'll get into that later, to see how much that has actually been used. But it's seen as it's not because there's so-called legitimate email being sent out through email service providers that are being sent to purely double opt-in lists. Um, it is commercial email is seen as a legitimate thing, but in reality, what is the difference between an opt-in email and a spam email? And so, because they both have commercial elements in them, someone might be selling a product that's, for instance, they're selling a financial product such as a mortgage service or something like that, that has a purely opt-in list, but often spam has been one of the ways that these services have been advertised, because there's been such a need for it. Things like debt consolidation. You see tons of advertising out there because they know, in traditional mediums, print medium and so forth, because they know there's tons of people that they're living beyond their means. They're buying houses they can't afford. They're maxing out their credit cards, all this sort of thing. So the question arose is that, well, how do you distinguish between someone who has an opt-in list for a commonly provided product, such as mortgage and things like that, versus someone that is just simply spamming? And so they said, well, the only real way to do this is to allow the people to decide, the recipients, rather than let our technology do it. Let's let the people and how they engage these emails decide if an email is spam or if it's something that they want. And if it's something that they want, then the whole thing is intended to get that to them. If it isn't something that they want, then that's where this anti-spam technology is there to block it as well. So in general, this is what's the trend, and that's becoming more and more pervasive with anti-spam technology, is this whole idea of email reputation. One of the things, for instance, is if you start up a mail server today and start sending mail from it, you're immediately seen as suspect, especially if you do a large amount of volume. So actually the length of time that your email server has been sending is a really good indication to them that, if you've got like 2 or 3 years where you've been at the same IP and that IP has been sending email, that's a very strong indication to these for instance, return paths, that you are a so-called legitimate sender, that you're not sending spam, and that helps your rating overall. So anyways, the other thing too, as I've kind of alluded to earlier, is with spam complaints. Spam complaints are made by people, are the best way an email or internet service provider can tell who is emailing commercial solicitations, whether solicited or unsolicited.